Pam Bondi fined $100,000 for wearing a cross. Her comeback silences the courtroom. They told her to take off the cross or pay $100,000. She stood up. She smiled. And what she said next left the entire courtroom frozen. What would you do in her place? Let us know in the comments and make sure to subscribe for more powerful true stories like this. Pam Bondi walked into the courtroom that morning with her cross necklace resting softly on her chest, quiet, elegant, and full of meaning. It was not flashy. It was not political. It was personal, a symbol of her late mother's faith, the very thing that carried her through the darkest moments of her life. But to Judge Wexler, it was an offense to court neutrality. "Remove it or face the fine," the judge said flatly, as if she had committed a crime. A hush fell over the room. Reporters scribbled. The opposing counsel smirked. And Pam? She stayed silent for a second, not because she was afraid, but because she had heard this before. Only this time, she was ready. Pam Bondi had faced courts before, but never like this. Never where her faith itself was treated like a threat. The necklace she wore today was not just an accessory. It was the same silver cross her mother gave her on the day she passed the bar. Her mother, a Sunday school teacher, used to say, "When you walk into a place of power, wear your truth on your heart." And that is what Pam had always done. But this courtroom had changed. For weeks, this trial had been making national headlines. A corporate scandal, millions of dollars gone, and one brave whistleblower who refused to stay silent. Pam was representing that whistleblower. She was fighting a billion-dollar company backed by elite lawyers and political connections. And right from the first day, strange things began happening. The court schedules were constantly changed, only for her. Key documents went missing just before cross-examination. Even her parking space was mysteriously reassigned every morning. It was subtle, but intentional. And now this? A fine for wearing a simple cross? She looked at Judge Wexler again. He was staring straight through her, eyes cold, as if trying to erase her very presence. And for a brief moment, a strange silence settled in the courtroom. Not the silence of order, but the silence before a storm. Pam did not flinch. She simply raised her chin and said calmly, "You may write down the fine." But deep inside, something was boiling. Not just for herself, not just for her client, but for every person in that courtroom who had been told to sit down, shut up, or remove a part of who they were. She was not going to let this go. Not this time. The courtroom murmurs did not die down after the fine. In fact, they grew louder. One young law intern in the back whispered, "Did the judge really just fine her for wearing a cross?" A bailiff cleared his throat nervously, unsure if he should intervene. But Pam stood still. Her silence was not weakness, it was calculation. She had seen this game before. When power feels threatened, it lashes out at symbols before ideas. That silver cross had nothing to do with the case. But to Judge Wexler, it was a reminder. A reminder that faith, identity, and conviction could still walk into his courtroom and not bow. Pam turned to her client, a young analyst who looked terrified. He had risked everything to expose fraud in the company he once believed in. Pam gave him a small nod. That nod said, "I will not back down, and neither should you." And then something happened no one expected. Pam stepped forward and requested a formal objection, not just to the fine, but to the court's conduct since the trial began. Her voice, calm yet sharp, echoed across the wood-paneled walls. "Your Honor," she began, "this court has fined me for expressing my faith, but I believe what is really being silenced is truth." Judge Wexler's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward slowly. "You are treading dangerously close to contempt, Ms. Bondi." But Pam was already too deep to turn back. She replied, "Then let the record show that the truth is what offends you most." The entire room went still. For a second, it felt like time froze. Even the stenographer paused her typing, eyes wide. Outside the courtroom, news crews were waiting. Inside, a storm was just beginning. The judge slammed his gavel harder than before. "One more word out of turn, Ms. Bondi, and I will hold you in contempt." But Pam had already laid the foundation. The courtroom was no longer just watching a trial, it was watching a reckoning. Whispers spread like fire. Reporters outside began texting furiously. Something unusual was happening inside that courtroom. Pam turned slightly, scanning the faces of the jury. Their eyes said it all: shock, curiosity, respect. She knew she had struck something deeper than legal ground. She had struck a nerve. Then came the next bombshell. Pam pulled out a small folder from her briefcase. Calmly, she walked up to the judge's bench. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I would like to enter new evidence into the record. Evidence that directly questions the impartiality of this courtroom." Wexler's eyes twitched. "On what grounds?" Pam opened the folder without breaking eye contact. "On the grounds that this court, under your supervision, has issued 3 previous fines in the last year targeting women for religious expression, all of whom were minorities." Gasps filled the room. The defense team, visibly shaken, looked at each other. Pam continued, "This is not just about a cross, Your Honor. This is about selective punishment. Discrimination wrapped in legal language." The judge's face went pale. The prosecution objected, but Pam anticipated it. "The objection is not to the evidence," she said coolly. "The objection is to being exposed." Now even the jury leaned forward. The courtroom was no longer Wexler's kingdom. For the first time it belonged to truth, and Pam Bondi was its voice. The judge's hand trembled as he reached for his glass of water. The courtroom was still, like the calm before a thunderstorm. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Bondi, you are treading dangerous ground." Pam's tone never wavered. "I am already standing on dangerous ground, Your Honor, but at least now, the world is watching." That was when the doors swung open. A court clerk rushed in, whispering urgently into the judge's ear. His face drained of color. He nodded stiffly. Then he looked up and addressed the court with a voice that suddenly lacked its earlier confidence. "We have just received a notice from the State Judicial Oversight Committee based on new evidence. This case is now under review." The entire courtroom gasped. Pam Bondi slowly turned to face the jury. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, you understand why this trial was never about a cross. It was about silencing voices that make them uncomfortable, about punishing belief when it does not fit the narrative." The jurors began nodding. Even a few members of the prosecution shifted uneasily. Then Pam delivered the line that would headline every media outlet that night. "They fined me $100,000 for wearing a cross, but what they were really afraid of was what that cross represents." A woman in the back clapped once, then another. Then the entire room erupted, not in disorder, but in admiration. Applause rained down in a courtroom that had just witnessed a legal war, and Pam Bondi had emerged not just undefeated, but undeniable. As Pam stepped out of the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but she walked calmly, the same cross still hanging proudly around her neck. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just her, standing in the storm she refused to hide from. A young law student approached her, tears in her eyes. "Ms. Bondi, I watched the whole trial. I thought I had to stay silent in law school to be taken seriously. But today, you changed something." Pam placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "Never let anyone tell you faith makes you weak. It is the reason I am still standing." The video went viral within hours. Hashtags like Bondi Strong, Faith on Trial, and Cross Not Crime exploded across social media. News anchors debated the judge's actions. Legal analysts admitted Pam had exposed something deeper, something broken. But perhaps most powerful were the messages pouring in from people across the country. Veterans, nurses, teachers, janitors, all saying the same thing: "You stood for us." That night, while the judge's career hung in limbo, Pam sat in her kitchen sipping tea, the courtroom chaos behind her. Her phone buzzed. Another message. This one from a retired civil rights attorney. It read, "Today you reminded America what courage looks like." The judge thought the worst had passed until the next morning when a subpoena landed on his desk. It bore the seal of the Federal Civil Liberties Commission. Pam Bondi had filed an official complaint. She was not done, not by a long shot. In a surprise press conference held outside the courthouse steps, Pam addressed the nation, her voice unwavering, her message clear. This is not just about me. It is about every student who was suspended for their beliefs, every employee who was denied a job because of their values, every citizen who was told that faith must be hidden to be accepted. Today, I say enough. Reporters leaned in, stunned by the calm fire in her tone. I am launching a national initiative, Liberty Wears a Cross, to provide legal support to those who are punished for their peaceful expression of faith. And yes, I will be suing the state for unlawful discrimination. Because if they can do this to me, they can do it to anyone. The room erupted. Some clapped. Others looked shaken. But no one could ignore her now. And across the street, watching through a tinted window, the judge sat in silence. He had tried to bury a woman with shame and silence, but he had only built her a platform, and she was standing taller than ever. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed again. But this time, the silence was different. It was not tense. It was reverent. Pam Bondi stood at the center, not as a defendant, but as a witness of history. The judge who fined her was no longer on the bench. He had been formally removed for misconduct, and the courtroom doors were now open to a very different kind of justice. A young girl in the front row clutched a silver cross necklace around her neck, looking up at Pam with wide, tearful eyes. Pam smiled at her gently, then turned to address the room. You tried to make my faith a weakness, she said softly, her voice echoing through the chamber. But all you did was prove it is my greatest strength. The entire room rose in a standing ovation. Lawyers, journalists, students, even former critics. Pam had not only won her case, she had changed the law. From that day forward, no one in the state could be fined or penalized for wearing a religious symbol in public spaces. The ruling became known as the Bondi Protection Act, and as Pam stepped out into the sunlight, cameras flashing and people cheering, she whispered to herself, faith always wins. Because in a world that tried to quiet her, she became the voice no one could ignore.